China just found a building material that could replace timber entirely, and it all began with a plant that no serious builder ever paid attention to. Right this moment, engineers have constructed a river crossing out of this exact stuff, and it is tough enough to support fully loaded trucks. You heard that correctly. A bridge capable of handling heavy traffic, made from something people used to call the poor man's timber. Imagine driving your vehicle over a structure built almost completely out of smashed and compressed grass fibers. But that bridge is just a small piece of the puzzle. The real shocker is that this same material grows back to its full harvest height in less than a decade. No traditional forest anywhere in the world can do that. Keep watching, because the reason experts overlooked this for a century is wilder than you might think. Give this video a quick like and hit subscribe so you are always in the loop. By the time we finish here, you will know exactly how this simple plant fought its way into official building codes. For 10,000 years, wood earned its spot as our top building choice the hard way, through endless trial and error that no one could fake. Builders love timber because you can lift it by hand, but it is tough enough to hold up a roof for 100 years. Factories love it because a single tree gives us boards, paper, and fuel with almost zero waste. Entire towns love it because a local mill can build hundreds of homes with nothing more than nearby trees and some basic tools. That perfect mix of being easy to shape, super strong, and deeply familiar is exactly why wood was used for almost every home, farm, and crossing built before the 1900s. Just imagine a builder with only a hand saw. In one afternoon, they can carve out a support beam that will stay strong for a lifetime. But here is what makes the reign of timber even more amazing. It makes itself. It just needs sunshine, water, and time. No massive factories, no burning furnaces, and no toxic chemicals are required to make it strong enough to hold up a house. However, there is a catch that most of us never really think about. Every single board sitting at your local hardware store represents decades of quiet, boring waiting that started way before anyone decided to cut the tree down. A forest planted on the day a baby is born will barely be ready to cut down by the time that same baby is buying their first home. That one simple truth is what finally made scientists stop trying to make trees grow faster and start wondering if trees were the right answer at all. If timber works so beautifully, you have to ask why anyone would spend years looking for a replacement. Why did it take so long to fix this if the problem was sitting in the woods the whole time? That is the core of one of the greatest hidden science stories of the past 40 years. Because despite how amazing wood is, it hit a hard wall of biology that no amount of smart building could ever bypass. Think about what that limitation means for the whole planet. Right now, the world needs about 80 million new homes every single year. That is like building enough houses for the entire country of Germany, year after year. And there is no tree planting program on Earth that can keep up with that kind of math. Timber built human history for 10 millennia, but it could never build it fast enough. The biggest flaw in wood is not a mistake in how we use it. It is a natural speed limit based on how trees actually grow. A tree that is solid enough for real construction needs anywhere from 25 to 75 years to fully mature. That means a tiny tree planted today will not be ready to frame a house until your grandkids are fully grown. This does not mean timber is bad. It just means timber is tied to a natural clock that is way too slow for modern building needs. Cities around the world are growing by roughly 70 million people every year. That is a crowd bigger than the entire population of France moving into urban areas annually. Our forests just cannot grow back fast enough to handle that. Because of this, modern builders switched over to steel and concrete. These are materials you can pour and melt whenever you need them. But, combined, those two choices create over 15% of all carbon dioxide released by humans. That is a larger chunk of pollution than every single car, airplane, and shipping truck on the planet put together. This is the trap that experts failed to notice for decades. The material that is safe for the Earth is way too slow. The materials that are fast enough are actively destroying the world we live on. It is like being forced to pick between a bicycle and a massive cargo truck, when what you really need is a bike that can carry a truck's worth of heavy goods. Nobody thought a third choice existed. For nearly 40 years, that perfect middle ground was ignored and brushed aside before anyone even did the math. Builders everywhere just accepted this as the permanent reality of their industry. Here is the fact that clears it all up. Even the best managed forests in the world cannot squeeze a 75-year growth cycle into 10 years. It does not matter how much extra water, premium dirt, or science you throw at the trees. They are just not designed to run a sprint. For decades, that biological speed limit was just accepted by experts as an unchangeable fact of life, rather than a puzzle waiting to be solved. Most folks never pause to wonder where the wood under their feet came from, or how many years it spent growing in the dirt before it was chopped down. But in 1987, a group at Nanjing Forestry University started looking at that exact problem, and they brought data that was impossible for the industry to ignore. The main concept seems ridiculously straightforward looking back. Rather than handling this plant like traditional timber and slicing it into perfect planks at a sawmill, what if you pulverized it into basic fibers first? It is exactly like how a mill crushes wheat into flour before a baker ever attempts to make a loaf of bread. Previous efforts to build heavy structures with this plant flopped for one major reason. Crews always tried to use the raw stalks exactly as they grew hollow, curved, and completely unpredictable. You could have one piece that held massive weight, while the stalk right beside it snapped under the exact same pressure. Hammering a nail directly into the tube usually split it right down the middle. Plus, if you didn't treat it chemically, it would rot away in just a few years, becoming a free buffet for local bugs. This new method fixed all of that by shredding the whole stalk into a pile of loose threads. Those threads are then dried out, drenched in special glues, lined up perfectly, and squashed under intense heat and massive pressure until almost every pocket of air is squeezed out. This is the crucial step that completely transforms how the stuff acts. Because the original plant shape is totally destroyed, all of its old flaws, the empty middle, the awkward rounded edges, the random weak spots, are completely wiped out. This is where you need to completely rethink what this material looks like. The moment it comes out of that heavy press, it doesn't look like a plant anymore. It looks exactly like a thick, heavy slab of premium timber. The color is even, the grain is smooth, and on a construction site, you couldn't tell it apart from expensive oak or maple unless someone pointed it out. If you rubbed your hand over a finished piece, you would bet money it was chopped from a century-old forest, not a field of tall grass cut down just months ago. The final board is so incredibly dense that it actually sinks if you drop it in a lake. It is tough enough to beat out almost any high-end hardwood floor on the market right now. And here is the kicker. The manufacturing process wastes almost nothing. They use about 80% of the raw harvest, sweeping up all the crooked, ugly pieces that a normal lumber mill would just throw in the trash. That total shift from a flimsy, hollow tube into a rock-solid, reliable building block is the only reason regulators even looked at it. But the big question was still hanging in the air. Could this factory-made block actually hold up in the dirt and grime of a real job site? The very first hurdle the scientists had to clear was microscopic weak spots. Even after all that crushing, natural plant fibers still have tiny flaws hidden inside. But let's look at what the actual test results showed. The top-tier boards handled over 23,000 pounds of crushing pressure per square inch, and their bending limits soared past 43,000. Those aren't grass numbers. Those stats put it right up there with the most expensive engineered wood you can buy, completely destroying its old reputation as cheap temporary scaffolding. To give you a real-world comparison, that is the kind of heavy-duty strength you expect from the floors of a multi-million-dollar mansion. Except, this stuff grew out of the dirt in less time than it takes a kid to get through grade school. For almost any standard house build, the actual weight pushing down on the walls is way below the maximum limit of the wood anyway. So those tiny microscopic flaws do not matter at all to the family actually living inside the house. The reality is, the support beams holding up your roof never actually face their absolute breaking point. They just have to survive normal, everyday life. And this new alternative easily passes that test, and then some. Then, there is the secret weapon that shocked even the scientists who invented the process. This crop shoots back up to its full, ready-to-cut height in less than a decade, and you don't even have to plant seeds. The roots stay perfectly healthy under the soil and just push up fresh stalks after every single cut. That insane growing speed unlocks a massive opportunity that is already playing out right now. It can provide heavy-duty building supplies to areas with terrible, ruined soil, places where it would take centuries to grow a proper timber forest back from scratch. The true reality here is a product with tiny, totally fixable quirks that the factory process already handles, combined with a regrowth timeline that leaves every traditional forest in the dust. And here is where folks usually misunderstand green materials. People think getting it strong enough is the hardest battle, and the fast growth is just a nice perk. In the building industry, it is usually the other way around. A material that is just good enough, but grows back in 10 years. It will completely dominate a perfect material that takes 80 years to grow, just because the fast grower can actually supply enough volume to meet the crazy global demand. That one shift in perspective, focusing on reliable regrowth rather than hunting for maximum raw power, is exactly what set this option apart from every other timber alternative that tried and failed to catch on. The debate was no longer about if the stuff functioned. The new question was how tall of a skyscraper regulators would actually let people build with it. The answer arrived in the form of a 7-story mid-rise in China. It currently holds the title for the tallest project constructed mostly out of this processed plant fiber, featuring floors, structural supports, and crossbeams that were entirely built in a factory before they ever touched the job site. Think about that scale for a second. Imagine a standard city apartment complex, the type you wouldn't even notice. Walking down the street held up completely by compressed grass instead of heavy steel or traditional wood. Engineers tracked the building closely for an entire year while people lived inside it. Through muggy summer heat and bitter winter freezes the exact conditions that normally tear standard materials apart. The structure behaved exactly how the lab tests predicted it would. The real-world results mirrored the safety models perfectly. That detail is a massive deal in the building world. Something can look completely bulletproof in a sterile testing room, but still fall apart after a few years of enduring real rain, shaking, and temperature swings that no machine can truly simulate. A veteran engineer, who has bounced between American and Chinese research labs for decades, took things even further. They used these manufactured planks to construct a highway crossing in Hunan province. A tiny crew threw the whole thing together in roughly 7 days, without firing up a single piece of heavy machinery. Envision a squad with fewer people than a basketball roster, assembling a span rated for big rigs, all in the time a normal site takes just to pour a single concrete foundation. As one of the lead builders mentioned to reporters on the scene, this was the first time they got to see their textbook math survive contact with a real-life river. If the idea of heavy traffic rolling over a river on processed grass blows your mind, what comes next is going to be even crazier to wrap your head around. Make sure you hit subscribe so you don't miss out. This all kicked off with just a single project, where fast assembly and lightweight parts were more important than the initial price tag. From there, the idea exploded into parking garages, pedestrian walkways, and now complete apartment blocks. City regulators who used to laugh this stuff off as cheap temporary fencing are now officially approving it for heavy structural pillars. That is the exact same legal stamp of approval that used to only go to high-grade steel and thick treated timber. That change in behavior from the people stamping the permits is honestly the most critical twist in this whole narrative. You can have the strongest substance on Earth in a lab setting, but without that official sign-off, it will never see a job site. Earning that trust took almost 4 decades of non-stop testing before even one inspector felt confident enough to put their career on the line. The wild claims finally had hard proof to back them up. As of 2024, over 100 different scientific groups across the globe have referenced this unique crushing and gluing technique in almost 7,000 academic papers over the last decade. That is a massive wave of data, far more than standard materials usually get in double that time span. And these aren't just nerds patting themselves on the back. These papers represent serious legal and financial groundwork. That kind of investment only happens when massive industries smell a product that is heading straight for the open market. The Chinese government even threw its weight behind a 3-year national strategy to pump out this product as a direct replacement for concrete and metal. They established massive test zones all over the nation just to show developers that this could work on an industrial level. Right now, China controls about 20% of the global supply of this raw plant, and they have already linked up an entire production pipeline stretching directly from the fields to the factory to the final beam. That is a massive head start that no competing nation can match right now. There is even another major push, partnered with global bamboo and rattan groups, actively trying to swap out dirty plastics and high-carbon products with this green substitute all over the world. The domestic bamboo market in China alone is shooting for a value of 700 billion yuan by 2025 and aims to cross the 1 trillion mark a decade after that. Those financial targets are so huge that rivals in the US, Vietnam, and India are already scrambling to set up their own licensing deals. When you have a product that matches the strength of wood, grows back faster, and hurts the environment less, that 10-year harvest clock isn't just a neat science trick anymore. It becomes an absolute market force that no smart construction firm can turn a blind eye to. Plus, third-party lab results confirming all this strength have been handed over to global standard boards. That means any architect on the planet can check the math themselves, instead of just trusting a shiny sales brochure. Let me give you a detail that really shows how massive this shift is becoming. When experts recently tracked down every single manufacturer making structural boards from this stuff, about 2/3 of them were operating out of China. However, fresh competitors are popping up right now across Vietnam, Singapore, Indonesia, and India. Even South America is getting in on the action, looking to export their own massive species of this plant. The whole process is expanding globally the exact same way any legitimate industry does. It moves forward one contract and one showcase building at a time, echoing the exact same explosion we saw with lithium-ion batteries and solar tech 10 years ago. Market experts predict that within the next 10 years, this alternative could push out a huge chunk of traditional lumber and light steel used in mid-sized buildings. Making that switch would be like handing millions of acres of old-growth woods back to nature. To help you visualize that, we are talking about saving a forest larger than the entire state of Vermont from the chopping block, and the benefits go way past just saving trees. The crop naturally sucks up and traps carbon dioxide as it gets taller. Official reports from China suggest their domestic fields of this plant stash away roughly 300 million tons of carbon annually just by sitting there. That is basically erasing the yearly pollution of a medium-sized developed nation. But transforming a cool new tech into an everyday standard is a massive uphill battle, and we have to be completely honest about the hurdles standing in the way. In most places, safety codes demand years of solid, real-world data before officials will ever greenlight a fresh material for buildings where people actually live and work. Making these heavy-duty planks requires massive shredders, chemical vats, and giant hydraulic crushers. And the areas where this plant grows wild usually do not have those factories yet. Those crushing machines can run millions of dollars apiece, and getting them running legally takes years. On top of that, only a fraction of the current manufacturers are openly sharing their stress test data. That leaves building designers guessing, making it incredibly hard for them to confidently write this material into their blueprints. Here is the harsh reality that is slowing down the whole revolution. The locations that desperately need cheap, rapidly renewing building supplies, the places overflowing with the wild plant itself, are usually totally lacking the heavy industry needed to make it. Basically, the raw goods and the giant machines to cook them down are almost never in the same zip code. Fixing that gap is no longer an issue for scientists. It is now a challenge for wealthy investors, government regulators, and workforce trainers. None of these hurdles cancel out the amazing stuff the science has already proven. They just show the hard dividing line between what is possible in a lab and what can actually get built in the real world. Getting across that line is about money, coordination, and politics just as much as it is about factory output. The engineers who perfected this technique handed humanity an incredible tool. Whether we grab that tool fast enough to fix the global housing crunch is a totally different conversation. Ultimately, the future of this fiber is going to dictate what our civilization builds and exactly where we are able to build it. At this very moment, the corners of the globe that would gain the most from a low-emission, fast-growing supply places across sub-Saharan Africa, South America, and Southeast Asia are, ironically, the furthest away from the big factories needed to churn it out. That bottleneck isn't the plant's fault. It is a massive lack of infrastructure. And solving that problem will decide if this innovation transforms global construction or just remains locked away in a few rich nations that could afford the upfront factory costs. This isn't just some hipster green alternative. It isn't a neat trick for backyard gazebos or a bullet point in an environmental pamphlet. It is a real, load-bearing replacement stepping in for lumber in actual homes right now. What is truly revolutionary here isn't just a tiny step forward. It is a massive leap. We have a farm-grown resource that equals the toughness of premium factory wood, but replenishes itself in a matter of years, rather than waiting for your grandchildren to grow up. That is not a small upgrade. It is an entirely new class of building. The academics who released this data gave us the keys. Whether the market uses those keys fast enough to hit our climate goals is up for debate. That burden now falls on politicians, factory bosses, and billionaires, rather than the scientists. That changes the game. Innovations like this get exponentially more important as time goes on, because every house framed today with traditional lumber traps us into relying on old-growth forests that take a human lifetime to bounce back. That is precisely why the test projects and trial factories running today matter so much. They carry implications that reach way further than the single roofs they are holding up right now. If seeing timber's 10 millennia winning streak finally take a hit makes you wonder what other ancient materials are being threatened, you definitely need to hear this next story. It is the exact focus of our upcoming video. China just rolled out a totally new substance that is 5 times stronger than standard concrete and somehow costs almost half as much. I put the link for that right down in the description. If this deep dive completely flipped how you look at the ceiling above your head, absolutely smash that like button and make sure to subscribe so you catch the next breakthrough. Hit the bell, because we drop new stuff weekly. Before you go, drop your thoughts down in the comments. Do you think the old-school lumber countries will pivot to this new tech in time to make a difference? Or are the tropical nations going to completely skip past them and take over the market?